A large part of the identity of the Spyro video games is Stewart Copeland's score, so much so that up to the release of the recent remaster of the series, some expressed specific concern about the handling of this facet of the game. In this video, I will examine distinguishing features of the music by analysing excerpts of pieces from the original game, focusing on Copeland's orchestration choices and on technical compositional details. At the end, I will summarise my analysis with a set of simple guidelines for creating music like the Spyro soundtrack. Stewart Copeland is an American musician known for co-founding and drumming with British rock band The Police, and for working as a composer on film, television and video game projects. Perhaps because of his experience as a percussionist, there is a clear rhythmic focus in his compositions, and this underpins the complexly layered textures present in his work for Spyro. Copeland recorded the Spyro soundtrack in his home studio with a Kurzweil 2500 synthesizer, recording and manipulating his own samples.
I can let up full symphonic sounds there. In fact, I have. In this game, I've got whole orchestra sounds that I recorded in Utah.
As Copeland's score often relies on the dense layering of polyrhythmic figures, it is important that each individual line is delineated, which is done through choice of instrument and register. By adequately separating each instrument, each part and its relationship to other simultaneous parts is clarified. Let's examine Copeland's broader orchestrational choices first, so we can understand what the temporal palette is comprised of. The rhythm section generally consists of drum set, electric bass, guitar, and organ. The drum set plays its typical role, maintaining a beat as a point of reference for other parts, and demarcating sectional changes through fills. The electric bass is often allocated an ostinato pattern, a repeated rhythmic figure, to establish the main rhythmic ideas over the underlying meter, and is used to set the harmonic foundation of the piece. The electric guitar is used similarly, and is regularly given ostinato patterns that either interlock with or directly match the bass. At various points, a distorted guitar is also often used in a manner similar to a crash cymbal, using fifth chords to emphasize new sections or vary repeating sections. Finally, the organ is used to fill out the harmonies, usually with simple triads. This is mainly achieved using stabs on upbeats or other syncopated figures. What is interesting is that the bass, the guitar and the organ are often used together in unison to create a hybrid texture and reinforce the bass line. This sometimes includes all three, but often it will be a combination of two of the instruments. You can hear this clearly in the Dry Canyon theme. This technique is comparable to a lot of reggae and rocksteady music, for example Bob Marley's Lively Up Yourself or Prince Buster's Earthquake, elements of which are present in some of Copeland's previous work, which he acknowledges in an interview with Jules Holland.
And my source of licks has been South America and, of course, the West Indies.
Copeland also makes extensive use of percussion. What I find especially notable is the prominence of the crotales, small pitched cymbals, which are often used by Copeland to double melodic figures and for countermelodies. They are a real signature of this soundtrack. The basic kit parts are also augmented with assorted percussion. The bass drum in particular is regularly featured, and its distinctive crescendoing roll appears throughout the score. Copeland's melodic textures are very active, with numerous layers working with and against each other to beget a strong sense of forward motion. These polyrhythmic textures generally rely on fairly simple ratios like 2:3, which allows each layer to be clearly heard whilst tightly interlocking with other parts. This is very evident in the Magic Crafted theme, which is firmly in 3/4 time, with 2:3 ratio syncopations in the melody. The melodies themselves are often busy, utilizing persistent strings of 16th notes, which lends them a certain relentlessness. This is evident in pieces like Misty Bog and Dark Hollow. What is interesting about these tracks particularly is the use of dynamic articulation to emphasize melodies within melodies and rhythms within rhythms. Some notes in the melody almost function as ghost notes, fulfilling more of a textural function than an especially melodic one. This is interesting given Copeland's background as a percussionist. He would be very used to playing ghost notes on the snare drum throughout his experience as a kit player, and it is easy to speculate that he has merely carried this habit over to his unique style of melodic writing. The countermelodies are often sparser, allowing space for the primary melodic material to develop whilst manoeuvring around it with melodically complementary but rhythmically contrasted material. Copeland's bass lines regularly depend on ostinato and feature syncopations that are typical of mento and rocksteady. They are generally repetitive and serve as the rhythmic foundation for the melodies that reside in the higher echelons of the orchestration. They are melodically very simple, mainly sticking to chord tones. Copeland's harmonies are generally fairly simple, since he depends more on the layering of rhythmically contrasting parts to generate complexity. A few pieces seem to follow a modified blues form. For example, Dry Canyon alternates between chords 1 and 4 before progressing to a 5 chord, where it would usually appear just before the turnaround in an ordinary 12-bar blues. His melodies are likewise mostly, if not invariably, diatonic, only using notes from the key, with the exception of perfectly ordinary chromatic passing notes like flat 3s. Copeland seems to have a preference for the Mixolydian mode, a major scale with the flat 7th, perhaps as a result of his experience in rock music, where this mode is often used. It's difficult to focus on anything in very specific detail, given that the scope of this video is confined to making general observations about the entire soundtrack of the first Spyro game, so there are inevitable deviations to the rules I am about to outline. However, having discussed and demonstrated a few of Copeland's most common and striking choices, I think it is possible to offer a useful overview of some recognisable techniques that could be used to create a convincing pastiche of the style of music featured in the first Spyro title. Build your bass line on a syncopated ostinato. Double the bass line in the guitar and/or organ. In melodic writing, tend towards the Mixolydian mode. In melodic writing, use chromatic passing notes. Transitions like flat 3 to natural 3 or sharp 4 to 5 work well, and the major 7th can be used in some situations as leading tone. Strings of 16th notes often work well in melodic writing, but it is important to pay close attention to the shapes of the phrases, otherwise it is easy to end up simply meandering. Chromatic approaches to chord tones work well in these kinds of melodies, as their gravitational pull towards more important notes maintains a sense of forward motion. Simpler melodies work well, but it is good to syncopate these. Setting up a 2 to 3 polyrhythm against the bass line achieves a satisfying effect quite reliably. Call and response hocketing textures between instruments are useful for creating pieces like Stonehill and Misty Bog. Try harmonising 16th note barrage style melodies with a countermelody. This produces a sort of fake counterpoint effect, which can be heard in the Dry Canyon theme and the credits music. For up-tempo Spyro pastiche, syncopated chord stabs on the organ are effective. Dominant 7th chords are preferred. Use crotales for rhythmic ostinato figures and for simple melodies. I have written and sequenced a piece that makes use of the above rules, hopefully demonstrating that they produce the results I have argued that they will. The piece is entitled Spyroid Gland.